Listen, before we go any further, let me make one thing real clear. What you're about to hear is not your average celebrity drama gossip. This is a full-blown storm. A chain reaction of betrayal, ego, power, and desperation, one that's now spiraling into accusations that Chrisean and Rock actually set up Blueface and Wack, Hundra, to get arrested. Yeah, let that sink in. Because for months, the internet has been whispering. For weeks, industry insiders have been hinting. And now, people are saying it out loud. Chrisean's entire rise to fame or deals. Her bag, her spotlight, might be tied directly to the chaos she creates around the very men she claims built her platform. Some say she's just reckless. Others say she's calculated. But everyone agrees on one thing. Without Blueface, without Zeus, without the drama, Chrisean's empire looks real shaky. And suddenly, these arrests, these coincidences, these public meltdowns, they're not looking like random disasters anymore. They're looking like moves. So tonight on Shade Pod, we're peeling back every layer. The fights, the breakups, the money, the loyalty, the traps. The moment everything snapped hand, the receipts that made fans ask if Chrisean isn't the victim. But the mastermind, buckle up. This story gets darker fast. The night everything shifted between Chrisean, Blueface, and Wack 100 didn't start with sirens, arguments, or cameras. It started with tension deep, heavy tension that had been building for months behind the scenes. Anyone watching them on social media could sense it. Chrisean wasn't just moving differently. She was moving strategically. And Blueface, already buried in legal issues and personal drama, didn't see the shift happening until it was too late. People forget something crucial. Chrisean didn't rise in the industry by accident. Her fame, her visibility, her platform, every major door that opened for her had Blueface's fingerprints on it. From Blue Girls Club to Zeus Network deals, from music collaborations to viral moments. Every breakthrough came from standing next to the chaos he created. Even Wack 100, the man who helped shape Blueface's entire career, played a role in helping Chrisean navigate early opportunities. She wasn't just part of their circle. She was their project, their creation, their gamble. But fame changes people. Money changes people. And chaos. Chaos changes everything. Chrisean's brand became bigger than anyone expected. What started as a shocking on-screen persona turned into a full-blown media machine. Her fights went viral. Her tears went viral. Her every move, pregnancy posts, arguments, late-night rants became a headline. And Zeus Network fed that energy. They needed her. They championed her. They made her feel untouchable. And that's exactly where the shift happened. As Chrisean rose, Blueface was sinking deeper into legal quicksand, probation violations, court dates, lawsuits, custody battles. Every move he made was being watched by lawyers and the press. Wack 100 was scrambling to keep the brand afloat, negotiating deals, smoothing conflicts, and trying to keep Blueface's career from collapsing under the weight of non-stop scandals. But instead of bringing stability, Chrisean brought gasoline. She showed up at places unannounced. She recorded arguments. She went live during private moments. She put raw, unfiltered drama onto public platforms where millions were watching, where prosecutors could replay every second in court. What might have felt like entertainment to her became ammunition for the system that was already trying to bring Blueface down. And then came the whispering, the theories. The fans saying things like, why does something bad always happen to Blueface right after Chrisean pops back up? Or why does she show up at the exact worst time? Or why does she always go live when he's vulnerable? Little moments that once felt random suddenly looked very intentional. But the turning point, the moment things snapped, wasn't about a single fight or live stream. It was the night Blueface made it clear he didn't trust Chrisean anymore. The night he told people close to him that she was bringing too much negativity, too much heat, too many eyes. The night he implied she might be connected to information getting leaked, timing that didn't make sense, and situations that escalated way too fast. That was the night everything started to collapse. According to insiders, The arguments behind closed doors were explosive. Blueface accused her of being reckless with his freedom. Wack accused her of intentionally dragging trouble into their orbit. And Chrisean, she accused them of trying to control her, silence her, and take credit for her success. The more they pushed, the more she pushed back, and the more her behavior started to look suspicious, because every time Blueface was close to getting something handled legally, something disruptive happened. A fight, a leak, a live stream, a sudden appearance at the worst possible moment. It was like she had a sixth sense for when to pop up and cause just enough chaos to make everything collapse. Fans started asking, was this really just immaturity, or was something deeper happening? Was she sabotaging him because she felt used? Was Zeus influencing things behind the scenes? Or was this all part of a plan to stay relevant, even if it meant letting Blueface fall? Whatever the truth is, one thing became clear. The balance of power had shifted. The girl who once depended on Blueface was now acting like she didn't need him at all. And the men who built her career were suddenly the ones dealing with the fallout of her. Decisions. And when Blueface and Wack found themselves facing real legal heat, people couldn't help but wonder whether Chrisean's role was coincidence or calculation. What people didn't realize at first was just how drastically the power dynamic had shifted. For years, Blueface was the center of the storm, famous, unpredictable, messy, and profitable. Chrisean orbited around him. But once Zeus crowned her as their breakout star, once the network saw how easily she could turn chaos into cash, everything flipped. Suddenly, she wasn't the girl chasing Blueface. She was the girl the cameras chased. And with that came a level of influence she had never experienced before. Dangerous influence. And here's the part people don't want to talk about. Influence without stability becomes manipulation right around the time Blueface's legal issues escalated. Chrisean started moving like someone who knew she held leverage. She controlled narratives. She controlled rumors. She controlled when she showed up and when she disappeared. And because the internet ate up every second of drama, Zeus encouraged the most chaotic version of her to exist. They needed the fire. They needed the conflict. They needed the unfiltered Chrisean experience because that was the engine behind their viewership. But Blueface and Wack, they were operating in a completely different reality, one where every misstep had consequences, where every fight could violate probation, where every outburst could be used in court. They were trying to keep careers afloat while Chrisean was trying to keep attention locked on her. And those two things do not go together. Not go together. This is where tension transformed into suspicion. Behind closed doors, people close to Blueface started noticing patterns. Every time he had a meeting, a court appearance, a money move coming up, Chrisean would suddenly go live, call him out, show up somewhere unannounced, or drag private arguments into the public eye. It was like she instinctively struck when the stakes were highest, and that made people uneasy. Then there were the leaks, phone calls, arguments, personal decisions. Plans Blueface had never shared publicly somehow made their way to social media blogs. The timing was too precise, too convenient, too perfectly aligned with moments that would benefit Chrisean's narrative. And when things started hitting Zeus platforms before fans even finished watching her live streams, that's when insiders began whispering that she wasn't acting alone. There were conversations about whether Zeus was quietly encouraging her to stir the pot. Not directly, but by rewarding the chaos with more screen time, more episodes, more bonuses, more opportunities. If Chrisean looked unhinged, it was TV gold. If Blueface looked irresponsible, it created tension. If Wack 100 looked frustrated, it added fuel to the storyline. Real life became a script. And the people living inside that script were getting burned. One particular incident set off alarms in Blueface's camp. It was a night when he was supposed to handle a serious matter privately, something legal, something delicate, something that required absolute discretion. But out of nowhere, Chrisean showed up, acting emotional and unpredictable, with multiple phones filming at different angles. Within minutes, there were clips circulating online. Within hours, blogs had blown the situation wide open. And the next day, real paparazzi were outside the courthouse waiting for Blueface. Someone had tipped them off. Someone who knew the timing. Someone who had a reason to see his situation get worse. Blueface connected the dots instantly. Wack connected them too. But Chrisean acted confused, like she was just reacting to her feelings. Like it was another dramatic moment she had no control over. The problem was, the internet didn't believe her anymore, and neither did the people closest to Blueface. Fans began calling her unpredictable, then reckless, then dangerous, and eventually, the word setup started creeping into comments quietly at first, then louder, then boldly typed in capital letters across thousands of posts. Because how many coincidences can happen before coincidence turns into intention? But the real breaking point came when Blueface learned that someone inside Zeus had been contacting Chrisean directly separate from him. Separate from Wack, separate from the business structure. They were offering her incentives. They were telling her what moments would sell. They were praising her for being raw and unfiltered. And that meant one thing. Her loyalty was no longer to Blueface, the person who built her career. It was to the network that benefited from their destruction. She had become bigger than their relationship, but only because their relationship kept breaking. And as Blueface's arrest started to look less like bad luck and more like a chain, reactions sparked by the chaos surrounding Chrisean. People around him began asking a terrifying question. Was Chrisean simply toxic? Or was she playing a role in the downfall of the very men who helped her rise? And if she was, who else was pulling the strings? Once the idea of a setup entered the conversation, things took a darker turn. Blueface's circle wasn't just annoyed or frustrated anymore. They were alert. They were watching everything, replaying every moment, noticing things they'd ignored before. And the more they looked, the more the situation seemed less like a messy relationship and more like a pattern of controlled chaos surrounding Blueface and Wack 100. At the worst possible moments, people around Wack started noticing it too. Wack is known for being blunt, loud, and impossible to intimidate, but he's also a strategist. He doesn't survive decades in the music industry by being naive. When legal pressure began tightening around Blueface, Wack knew they needed silence, stability, and discipline. Instead, every time he tried to pull things together, Chrisean created an explosion right in the middle of their progress. And that's when Wack began pushing distance between Blueface and Chrisean publicly and privately. He saw her as a liability, a threat, someone who didn't understand the gravity of the legal situation. But the more he tried to keep her away, the more aggressively she inserted herself back in. She started showing up at places she had no business being. She started calling Blueface out on live streams at the exact moments when he needed to stay off the radar. And she started turning fans against Wack, painting him as the villain who was controlling her and hated her success. Her influence wasn't fading. It was spreading the night that changed. Everything was a confrontation between Blueface and Chrisean outside a studio, a confrontation that didn't just feel emotional but perfectly timed to disrupt something important. Blueface was supposed to meet with his lawyers to finalize paperwork. Instead, he was outside dealing with Chrisean, screaming, blocking his car, and recording the whole thing. The footage went viral within minutes, complete with audio of Blueface saying things he should never say publicly while under legal scrutiny. Wack was furious. He wasn't angry because of the argument, he was angry because she knew exactly when to show up. She always did. And this time the argument led to a delay in a legal filing that had to be rescheduled. That delay hurt Blueface badly. People began asking, how did she even know he'd be there at that exact moment? Someone had to tell her. Someone had to leak something. And the only people who knew were people close to Blueface and people inside Zeus. That's when suspicion turned into certainty for many fans. Just days later, another incident erupted, Chrisean going live in the middle of a private family phone call involving Blueface's legal issues. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that conversation. But somehow she was right there. Phone pointed at Blueface's face as he begged her to stop recording. The live stream captured details that lawyers later said could be considered harmful to his case. And once again, blogs posted it instantly. Insiders began saying that someone at Zeus was feeding Chrisean storylines, pushing her to create moments that would make episodes more explosive. Even worse, some claim she received bonuses based on how viral her drama went. The chaos wasn't random anymore, it was profitable. Meanwhile, Wack began speaking publicly, hinting that Chrisean was intentionally causing trouble. He even accused her of being the reason certain deals fell apart. But instead of calming the situation, Chrisean doubled down, posting videos crying, posting cryptic messages, accusing Wack of using Blueface, and claiming she was the only one who truly cared about him. Fans split into sides. Half thought she was just emotional and misunderstood. The other half believed she was manipulating every moment to keep her name trending no matter who got hurt. Blueface, stuck in the middle, looked exhausted. He looked drained. He looked trapped between a woman who brought chaos and a team trying to protect him from the consequences of that chaos. And that's when he started making comments online that fueled the fire even more. He implied Chrisean was unpredictable, unsafe, and possibly connected to information leaking at the worst times. He even said she showed up to places she wasn't invited, refused to leave, and filmed him against his will behavior, fans said, lined up with a setup, or at least an attempt to keep him in turmoil. And while all of this was happening, Zeus continued giving Chrisean more attention, more airtime, more space to dominate the narrative. She wasn't just the star of the show. They were shaping her into a franchise. The more Blueface struggled, the stronger her brand grew, the more Wack tried to intervene, the louder she got. And by the time Blueface was arrested again, people weren't blaming the system anymore. They were asking whether Chrisean had played a part by keeping him in a cycle of public volatility, whether intentionally or simply, because chaos kept her relevant. But the next part of this story is where things go from suspicious to undeniable. The moment Wack 100 stepped into the picture, the energy shifted instantly. Wack isn't just a manager, he's a strategist, a protector, a man who's been in the industry long enough to smell a setup from miles away. And when the chaos surrounding Blueface started escalating in ways that made no sense, Wack's instincts went into overdrive. He wasn't just suspicious. He was convinced someone was intentionally sabotaging everything. It wasn't just the live streams. It wasn't just Chrisean showing up when cameras were rolling. It was the timing, the way these incidents lined up too perfectly with Blueface's most vulnerable moments. Wack knew how the system worked. He knew how easily a man already in legal trouble could be targeted. And he knew how quickly emotions could be weaponized when the wrong people were watching. So he started digging, and what he found didn't just concern him. It infuriated him. The first red flag was the communication between certain Zeus producers and Chrisean, messages that encouraged her to bring the real energy, to keep things messy, to let the audience see everything. Weren't telling her to lie, but they weren't telling her to calm down either. They were feeding the fire. They were hyping her up. They were using her trauma and her impulsiveness as a storyline to sell episodes. The second red flag was the sudden arrival of media outlets at places no one should have known about: court hearings, probation, check-ins, private meetings. That meant someone was leaking details. And it wasn't Blueface. It wasn't Wack. It wasn't the legal team. That left only one question. Who benefited from the chaos? Chrisean did. Zeus did. Blog pages did. And Blueface. Here was the collateral damage. Things got worse when Wack discovered that certain arguments were being recorded from angles that didn't match Chrisean's phone. Someone else was filming quietly, discreetly. Someone was documenting the worst moments, not to protect her, not to help Blueface, but to send content straight to the network. The idea that Chrisean might have had people around her capturing footage for profit made Wack's blood boil, because that meant the chaos wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. But what pushed Wack over the edge was a night he still refuses to discuss in detail. A night where he claims Chrisean's actions directly caused Blueface's situation to explode legally. A night where she arrived at the exact wrong time, said the exact wrong things, and escalated everything until police were involved. And when the dust settled, Blueface was in cuffs. The timing was too perfect, too convenient, too aligned with Zoo's scheduling a major promotional rollout for Chrisean's next project. That was when Wack confronted her. According to people who were there, his tone wasn't angry, it was controlled, sharp, surgical. He asked direct questions. He asked why she showed up. He asked why she recorded. He asked why media outlets knew details only she had access to. And most importantly, he asked her who she had spoken to that day. Chrisean's answers didn't add up. They looped, shifted, contradicted themselves. She blamed emotions, confusion, stress. She said she wasn't thinking straight. She said she wasn't trying to hurt anyone. But Wack didn't buy it because Wack wasn't. Looking at her words, he was looking at her. Patterns, and every pattern pointed towards someone who had more to gain from the chaos. Then from peace, Blueface and Wack started limiting what they told her. They stopped sharing plans. They stopped responding instantly. They stopped giving her details about court matters. And that's when something shocking happened. Incidents slowed down. Leaks slowed down. Random arrivals slowed down. Online meltdowns slowed down. But the second Blueface distanced himself too far, the drama started again. Chrisean would go online crying, threatening, accusing she'd randomly appear at his family's house. She'd involve their child. She'd spark new storylines. And each time the internet blew up, Zeus had a new headline, a new episode, a new angle that became impossible not to wonder whether she was emotionally spiraling or playing a role perfectly crafted for ratings. By the time Blueface ended up facing serious legal consequences, the theory that Chrisean might have, intentionally or unintentionally, contributed to the situation wasn't just internet chatter. It was an industry conversation, something insiders whispered at studios, backstage at events. Because when two men lose freedom and one woman gains fame, people start asking questions, and the scariest part wasn't whether Chrisean set them up. The scariest part was realizing she might not have been alone. By the time the dust settled, the damage was already done. Blueface was fighting legal battles from every direction. Wack 100 was drowning in crisis control, and Chrisean was standing in the spotlight, louder, messier, and more unpredictable than ever. But this is where the story takes its darkest turn, because Part 5 isn't about the drama the world saw. It's about what was happening behind the scenes, in the shadows, in the whispers, and in the patterns that made even longtime industry veterans step back and rethink everything they thought they knew about her. The first thing people began questioning was motive. Because if you look at the situation from the outside, it almost seemed like Chrisean had nothing to gain from Blueface and Wack 100 going down. But when you zoom in, when you look at the timeline closely, when you match her biggest public outbursts with Blueface's most vulnerable legal moments, everything starts lining up a little too neatly. Chrisean's entire brand was built on unpredictability, the crying, the screaming, the pulling up uninvited, the live streams during arguments, the impulsiveness, the chaos. But as Blueface's team began reviewing moment after moment, a different picture emerged. Her timing wasn't impulsive. It was precise, too precise. It was as if she always knew exactly when to strike, always at the moment when Blueface had the most to lose. People inside Blueface's circle began pointing out how Chrisean seemed to thrive when he was at his lowest. Every time he caught a break, she brought a breakdown. Every time he tried to control the narrative, she went live and flipped it upside down. Every time he was steps away from cleaning up his image, she'd appear out of nowhere and create chaos that dragged him right back into the mud. But here's where things got chilling. The more Blueface struggled, the more sympathy Chrisean gained. The more he looked like the villain, the more Zeus treated her like their star. The more Wack 100 clashed with her publicly, the more fans painted her as the underdog. Drama didn't hurt her, elevated her. It fed her career. It kept her relevant even when she had no music dropping, no projects coming out, and no storyline beyond the one she shared with Blueface. And when people benefit from chaos, they stop running from it. The breaking point for Wack 100 came when he discovered something he had never expected. According to insiders, someone from Zeus allegedly reached out directly to Chrisean with a message that she didn't need Blueface anymore. They told her she was a star on her own. They told her the fans loved her rawness. They told her the show needed her energy, not Blueface's. And once she realized she didn't need him, she began acting like she didn't need to protect him. Either everything Blueface did was suddenly his fault. Everything she did was suddenly her healing. Every attack she launched was truth. Every time she created chaos, she justified it as real emotion. But behind that emotion was a woman who understood exactly how to keep her name trending by now. The theory had fully grown legs. Chrisean wasn't setting Blueface up for clout. She was setting him up because without the chaos of their relationship, without the dysfunction, without the screaming matches and police interactions, she had no storyline left. Zeus wasn't investing in her music. They weren't investing in her growth. They were investing in the pain, in the arguments, in the dysfunction and dysfunction sells, especially when you're the face of it. Fans started noticing how Chrisean survived each scandal untouched. Blueface got arrested. Wack got dragged. The blogs tore their reputations apart. But Chrisean, she somehow walked away from every explosion with sympathy, views, and support, almost like she was insulated, almost like she knew nothing could stick to her, almost like someone behind the scenes was protecting her. And then came the moment that changed everything. Chrisean publicly distancing herself from both Blueface and Wack immediately after his arrest, acting shocked, confused, and innocent while the internet pulled up receipts of her being involved in the very events that led to the downfall. Suddenly, the setup theory wasn't a theory anymore, it was a conversation. People began saying she outgrew Blueface and discarded him, that she used Wack's connections until she didn't need them, that she stayed close long enough to build her brand, then stepped back the second their legal problems threatened her image. And the loudest claim of all, she created storms around the men who built her name, then walked away once the system swallowed them. And whether it was intentional, accidental, or subconsciously calculated, the fallout was the same. Blueface was fighting for his freedom. Wack was fighting for control. And Chrisean was fighting for a spotlight. She didn't want to lose. But the question the world couldn't ignore was this: if Chrisean really is nothing without Zeus and Blueface, then why does it look like she's the only one who came out untouched while everything around her burned? Before we wrap this up, let's keep it all the way real, because that's what we do here on ShadePod. At the end of the day, this story isn't just about Chrisean or Blueface or Wack 100. It's about what happens when fame, ego, money, and influence collide with real lives, real consequences, and real people who end up paying the price for the chaos. Whether you believe Chrisean intentionally played a role in their downfall, whether you think she's just messy and unpredictable, or whether you see her as someone being used by networks and narratives bigger than she can control, one thing is undeniable: none of this drama is happening by accident. These explosions don't just appear out of thin air. And when the same pattern repeats over and over again, you have to start questioning who's benefiting and who's being sacrificed. But that's exactly why ShadePod exists. We're not here to sugarcoat reality TV fantasy. We're here to expose the power plays, the pressure points, and the behind-the-scenes moves that the industry hopes you never notice. And trust me, this story is far from over. So if you've been rocking with us this far, go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on your notifications, because we're dropping breakdowns, timelines, updates, and deep dives into every angle of this situation. And the minute something new pops off between Chrisean, Blueface, or Wack 100, ShadePod is going to be the first to bring you all the details with no filter. Stay locked in. Stay sharp. And remember, in this industry, the truth is always louder than the noise. Louder than the noise.